action, action. Lights, camera, action. Let's go. Lights, camera, action, action. Pop up a little, pop up a little.
I'm Mark Ramsey. I am super duper proud to be sitting here opposite Brian Benedict. Everybody knows Brian Benedict. Brian is the president of Cats 360, which means you, Brian, know as much or more about how to get more money from more broadcasters and across more distribution channels than just about everybody. Is that right?
I'm not sure about that, but I do my best, and I appreciate the accolades. So thank you.
Brian, I saw the write-up that you were featured in Inside Radio recently, and it was ostensibly about the transformation of the advertising world and the fact that digital is now number two ahead of print, the number two category. Now, that creates a big pie of potential revenue, but as you explained in that piece, not all of that is available to radio. Can you talk about for a second, what's available to broadcasters now that wasn't available before, and what the size of this pie really signifies?
Sure. I think what happens, Mark, is a little misleading. The IAB does some fantastic work. I'm involved in a lot of their initiatives, and I really am a big fan of what they do. I think what happens sometimes is when the IAB produces their annual revenue reports, everyone gets excited that this is a $26 billion market that we can all participate in. It's almost the equivalent, though, of saying, okay, the entire offline market is worth X, so that is available to me. The reality, to kind of extend the analogy, is if TV has their piece of the offline market, as does radio, as does newspapers and beyond, in the online world, right, that $26 billion really has to be analyzed a bit. First and foremost, half of it goes to search, which you and I both know goes to a few firms that have wonderful search engines and millions of dollars invested in that. Then you have display, audio, video, classifieds, email. So every participant in this online ecosystem has a piece of revenue that they go after. So I think if you take a step back from that, you have about 2/3 of that $26 billion that's what's called performance-based. So cost per click, cost per action, cost per engagement, all these fancy terms that we hear, which, again, is fine, but it's about 1/3 of it's branding money, I guess is what I'm saying. So for the radio industry, who is really investing more and more in online assets, they really don't participate in the search marketplace, and they really don't participate for the most part in the performance marketplace. So when it comes down to it, that $26 billion is for the available digital dollars to radio is more like a sliver of that. So perhaps it's a $5-6 billion market, which, don't get me wrong, is still quite a bit of money. I just think I'll get calls quite a bit from different broadcasters. Oh my goodness, there's all this digital money out there, and there is. We just have to make sure we know what we're going after, what we have. Because sometimes you get into conversations where you're being asked, "Hey, can you do behavioral targeting? Can you do audience retargeting? Can you do this cost per click campaign for me?" I think for most radio broadcasters in general, the answer is no.
Okay, for most radio and broadcasters in general, the answer is no. Does that mean for some radio broadcasters the answer is yes? And if so, is that a direction that more need to be headed in?
I think so. I think for some of and perhaps it has to do with size. I don't think that means everything, but I think some of the larger radio broadcasters have invested or are continuing to invest a lot in their digital infrastructure. So the type of targeting that the online ad community is looking for, the type of segmentation that they're looking for, the type of bells and whistles beyond just their websites, but in mobile and other areas, those are some items that a year or two ago some of the larger radio broadcasters couldn't answer. Now they're starting to be able to do that. So a lot of this has to do with investments that have been made or lack of. Thus, as you do a good job pointing out in your blog, I think we all of us in the radio industry have a little bit of catch up to do. But I think there's a few that are setting the bar. I think some of the larger ones.
And that was one of my questions for you, in fact, which is, why are we so far behind? Why, as an industry, and I almost sense that what you're saying there, and I understand it, is that the larger groups with more resources and more foresight maybe are investing dollars in such a way as smaller groups with fewer resources and maybe less foresight cannot or do not. Are we really creating a tiered system of broadcasters where we're going to have the digital winners and the digital losers going forward?
Yeah, well, I hope not. I work with. That's why I think there's some exceptions. Katz works with most folks in the radio industry as clients, and there are some folks on the smaller side that are doing a wonderful job with their digital platforms. So I don't want to make a case that it's just the big boys that are doing it right. I think there are some out there on the medium to smaller side that are really doing a nice job. I think really taking advantage of this local online marketplace that's starting to develop literally as we speak. So certainly the larger radio broadcasters do have the benefit of more resources. They also have the benefit of scale, right? Digital, at least on the levels that I work in on a national, regional level, it's all about how much scale can you bring to the table, then how can you segment that audience into different buckets so the online ad community can then target accordingly. So I think the benefit of scale certainly helps, but as the online local marketplace really starts to ramp up, which frankly, Mark, is where all the growth is going to come from, I think the medium to smaller broadcasters are in a good place.
And that's what I want to talk about with you next, is that online local marketplace, because you indicated that some of the smaller groups are excelling largely because their ability to excel in those smaller local digital markets. And I wonder, that means, from that argument, it's not about scale, at least on that level, and anyone can do it if they do the right things. So what are the right things to do, and what is the upside on the local digital market level?
Yeah, well, let me start with stating the obvious, and we do a lot of this even on a national level, Mark, but the power that all of us have with even towers today is we have this offline vehicle that is designed to be married with an online vehicle. And, a lot of these local online companies don't have that. And I think we somewhat underestimate the power of the offline medium that is designed, I think, to be married with, again, some sort of strategic online channel. So first and foremost, as this local online market starts to develop, I think the radio broadcasters need to really, and it sounds counterintuitive, right? If it's an online sort of offering and an online ad dollar, why would you be talking about your offline assets? I think that's crazy. I mean, you should be highlighting the power of this megaphone that you talk about a lot in your blog, and then look to say, okay, what sort of online channels can be activated to complement that, right? And some simple things like online audio and streaming audio should be married with offline radio. I mean, they're certainly in the local markets, there isn't enough scale yet for the online audio channel to really live on its own. It should be married, at least for now. We'll see how it develops, but it should be married with offline radio. Online video is becoming, a huge request from the online ad community. So having online video within your site, pre-roll video within your media player and beyond, and that's inventory, Mark, that can really, you can drive price points there. So the national marketplace values online video at $25, $30, $35 CPMs and beyond. So if the broadcasters can create a video asset and a video product that has a good response from the ad community, you can really drive price points. So audio and video and social and mobile and a lot of the things that, again, you talk about a lot in your circles are all areas where I think the local broadcasters can take advantage of the local online marketplace.
Brian, it's funny because you talk about streaming and some of these other opportunities, and some people will say, well, I've gotten calls from people saying, should I keep streaming or should I drop it because it's such a drain on me? And I say, whoa, I actually know people who are making money out of this. And the difference between the two, it seems to me, is that a level of commitment to succeed at something and the resources, human, financial, etc., invested in it to succeed at that, versus viewing it as an afterthought, viewing it as an also-ran, viewing it as a distraction, viewing it as something which takes away time, energy, and listenership. Though it's almost like we're structured wrong, is what I'm trying to suggest to you, and you tell me if this is right, that the things we pay attention to are the things we can monetize, and the things we refuse to pay attention to, we're never going to monetize.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think I have a little biased view of that world because of what we do. But you and I both know the cost structure involved with streaming audio content is a lot different than it is on the offline side, right? So between bandwidth and royalties and beyond, there is a cost that has to be covered. I've said to many broadcasters, Mark, in local marketplaces, some understand this and some look at me like I have three heads. I actually think being able to collapse in perhaps this kind of online audio network within individual marketplaces has power. So the whole idea of collaborating amongst themselves within these markets to present a sizable online audio audience, I think would pay some dividends in some of these local markets. Again, that requires collaboration. That requires everyone getting around a table and figuring out, is there a way to present this a little bit differently? Because I do understand where some broadcasters say, hey, I have 2 radio stations in X market, and I'm going out and talking about my streaming assets, and nobody wants to buy them. Well, what's the value? What sort of value are you presenting? Is it perhaps better to talk with the collection of audio publishers / broadcasters in your market and say, you know what, is it more powerful perhaps to go in together with a 20, 25 station network that could be segmented a lot of different ways, and that really, at least in the infancy of this channel, that will tell the story of the power of online audio. I mean, again, some people hear that, some don't, but I'm hoping more are receptive to that idea, because that's a way to take these local online marketplaces with online audio as an asset and start to make some money with it.
It seems to me, from what you're describing, because that's an interesting thought, that to a great extent we're just not structured to excel along those lines, that we view our business still even today as the traditional kind of agency-driven, ratings-driven business. And I'm not sure, even as people see that model evolve under their feet, I'm not sure they know how to restructure in order to exploit where we're headed. Is that true?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just for perspective, I was a general sales manager in New York City here about 6-7 years ago at Z100, so one of the flagship brands at Clear Channel, and really had the ability to see firsthand, how local sales structures work and kind of experiment with different things. I think when you're working or dealing with online assets, Mark, you really got to have a degree of sophistication, not because it's any brain surgery. Language a little bit different. The targeting is a little bit different. Tracking and monitoring and optimizing the campaigns are a lot different. So there are elements of the online buy that are much different than the offline world that most sales organizations are used to. So I think it's certainly the idea of training and understanding really what you're selling is of huge benefit. And I think oftentimes what I hear from GSMs or market managers around the country is saying, my sales staff has no idea what they're doing on the online side. Well, that's shame on you. We have to be training them to at least be dangerous, be comfortable with these assets. As I said before, how are they activated alongside your offline assets as well? And if that's not the basis and the core of your sales structure, then something's really wrong.
Fundamentally, as I like to say, it's not that we're selling spots. It's that we're monetizing relationships we have with audience, relationships audience have with us, relationships audience have, consumers have with our clients, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and that's at the end of the day, just being able to have a dialogue with the consumer is what's new, I think, to a lot of salespeople. I had something come up the other day and even with clients, by the way. I had something come up the other day where there was an opportunity for a client to respond to a consumer through an activation that we did. And I said, well, what do you want to say to them? And the kind of the funny response, Mark, was they said, I really don't know. I never had to really respond to a consumer before through my ads. And it's funny, right? But we've been used to just barking at consumers for so long with these 15, 30, 60-second messages. Well, now that you have a dialogue going with them, what do you want to say to them? And, certainly easier said than done, but you talk about this being new to sales structures around the country. It's also quite new to advertise as well.
Yeah, it's and a great opportunity for both, to be sure. Is it true or false that the pie available, when we talk about ratings and the ranker and so on, that the pie of advertising dollars available in that traditional vehicle is shifting to these other areas, digital and other areas? In other words, if you ignore the digital world and view it as non-traditional revenue that's a nice bonus on top of my regular revenue, do you do so at your own harm?
Some of it is. I want to be candid. I think sometimes what happens is whether you're a local advertiser, regional or national, to dip your toe in the water with some of these assets that radio broadcasters have on the digital front, sometimes you have to experiment from your traditional ad budget. I'm not saying anything's right or wrong about that. It just is what it is, right? There's a pile of money that the advertiser has. X amount is allocated for, call it branding in radio, and perhaps there's a little sliver for testing and learning. I think to get a client into audio streaming, video streaming, some type of social activation, mobile, sometimes you have to carve out a little bit of that traditional money to start. Now, what I find happens is as time goes on and you fulfill those programs correctly, now they're allocating incremental digital money for those programs the next time around. So, I think, my staff does work kind of in both communities, Mark. We service the digital agency customers in New York and all around the country, which, those demands are pretty high with the targeting requirements, the optimization concerns, and those sort of things. Then we've got the traditional radio customers that I'd say the last year and a half are really starting to bust open their budgets to try some things online. So what I guess I'm saying here is sometimes you do have to sacrifice a little bit of that traditional budget to get them to try something online. Next time, though, if you do a good job fulfilling that, you'll get that incremental money beyond the traditional budget. I hope that makes some sense.
Okay. Last question, Brian, then. If you were to say to a local broadcaster, if they were to ask you, what's the one thing, the most important thing I should do in order to drive more digital revenue to my broadcasting operation, what would it be?
My simple response would be, is it worth your time? Are you allocating time yourself as the leader of your cluster in your market? When you attend a sales meeting, and hopefully you do, is it part of your culture? Is it important to you? Because I think, I don't care if you're selling radio or you're selling widgets, if the leadership is making online important, it's going to be important to the entire organization. So whether it be products, sales, promotions, or otherwise. So I think there needs to be a culture, Mark. I know this is a fairly simple answer, but I think honestly it is simple. If there's a culture inside a radio station or a set of radio stations in the market that values digital, where there is truly some experimentation going on, not afraid to take risks, not afraid to fail, right? So all this stuff doesn't always work. You have to do some testing and learning to kind of see what does work with your customer base. If that's part of your culture, I think you're going to find the online revenues following. If it's just kind of a force-fed thing coming down from corporate and you're going through the motions as the leader in your market, don't expect sales staff to do it.
Great advice. Brian Benedict, president of CATS 360. Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity.